Hello. Welcome if you're new here. My last video did insanely well. I'm really happy about it. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for subscribing. Today I want to talk about the new Mean Girls movie musical that just came out. I've got a lot of things I want to say. We're just gonna dive right in. If you missed it, a new Mean Girls adaptation just hit theaters. Marketing for it was a little confusing. We're gonna get into that for sure. But essentially what happened is the original Mean Girls came out in 2004. And then a Broadway musical adaptation went up in 2018, and they took the Broadway musical adaptation and re-adapted it back into a movie, and it just came out. This movie has been getting a lot of criticism online, from the marketing to the actual content of the movie to the music, all of that stuff. And I have thoughts. First, let's talk about the marketing. This movie got a lot of criticism because it did not make it explicitly clear in the first trailer that it was a musical. And by explicitly clear, I mean there was no indication whatsoever. This, in combination with the fact that the same thing happened with Wonka. Wonka was also a musical, but none of the trailers really led on that it was a musical. And it led people online to come to the conclusion that big film doesn't think we're gonna like musicals. So they don't want to let you know that it's a musical ahead of time, because then they think they'll get less people to go see it. Now, I'm not talking about Wonka here, but just the combination of both Wonka and Mean Girls doing this was a bit of a topic of conversation on TikTok a few months ago. But the other main thing that was included in the marketing that's going to end up being important later is the idea that this is not your mother's Mean Girls. So instead of marketing it as a musical, it just marketed it as a new, fresh take for a new young audience. Like I said, a lot of people were pretty upset about this, and I can't really blame them. It was very confusing that they didn't seem to want to tell us that this was a musical. It was very bizarre. But the bizarreness of that aside, I think the most important piece here is the Not Your Mother's Musical, or Not Your Mother's Mean Girls. Also Not Your Mother's Musical, I guess, unless your mother's written a musical. Unless she wrote Mean Girls, then this is not her musical. The reason I think it's important is because I think I've said at least once in every video I've made so far that when you're analyzing art and media, you have to think about what the creator was trying to do in order to judge whether or not it was successful. Now, that's different from subjectively liking it, right? Whatever your opinion was watching it, whether or not you enjoyed it, that's just one piece of the overall puzzle. But there's a lot more when it comes to actually analyzing a piece of art. What were the creators trying to do, and then were they successful? So with Mean Girls, what were they trying to do? Well, they marketed this as a fresh new take for a fresh new audience. They were trying to make a Mean Girls for the kids and teens of today. Mean Girls came out in 2004. I was 6 in 2004, which is crazy because I remember Mean Girls being such a core part of my childhood. It was a super popular movie, but I was obviously way too young to watch it when it originally came out. So it must have stayed at the height of popularity for a long time, and a lot of kids could relate to it. The message of the original Mean Girls really was that changing yourself in order to be popular does not really lead to happiness, and that talking poorly about other girls behind their back only makes you look bad in the end, and also that it won't make you happier as well. And a lot of people really related to both that and some of the funnier lines. Quotes from Mean Girls were thrown around all the time. Is butter a carb? And possibly the most famous line, or at least the most quoted line amongst me and my friends. They did not include this line in the adaptation, and it made me so upset. Because this is like my favorite line from the original movie, but it's the, "I can't go to Taco Bell, I'm on an all-carb diet. God, Karen, you're so stupid." My friends and I said that to each other all the time. Specifically the "God, Karen, you're so stupid" part. Also that they didn't make Karen's boobs know when it was raining. That was another thing that they cut that I was pretty upset about. But anyway, I digress. It was really funny, and it connected with a young audience. So from the marketing, it appears as though they are attempting to do the same thing with a different young audience, which makes it different from a lot of the nostalgia bait that's come out recently. Most of the stuff that's come out recently that's related to something that came out a long time ago is actually intended for the original audience of that media. The new Hunger Games book, the new Twilight book, both of which were more targeted at the original fans of this book series than they were a new generation of young adult readers. And I feel like as a result, we as a generation, those of us that are in our 20s right now, have gotten kind of self-centered when it comes to media. And if it's at all related to something that we're aware of, then we expect it to be made for us. And I think that's a large part of my issue with a lot of the criticism that the new Mean Girls movie has gotten. People are criticizing it as though it was made for adults. And in my opinion, I don't think it was. I think you can see that in the marketing and in the actual movie itself. There were many points in it that I'm sure I would have liked a lot better if I was significantly younger. probably would have related to it a lot more. But that's okay. It wasn't made for me and I can accept that. I think it's crazy that they put on the poster, "Not Your Mother's Mean Girls," and people still went into watching it expecting it to be their mother's Mean Girls, and then were mad when it wasn't a carbon copy of the original movie. That already makes me kind of irritated when it comes to adaptations. I feel like I have a somewhat unique perspective on adaptations, especially as someone who's prominently a reader. It's well known that readers typically hate the movie adaptations of books. To me, I think the most important thing is that it keeps the essence, the feeling of it, right? The actual plot itself, I don't think is as important as that you walk away with the same message that you did in the book. Part of the fun of an adaptation is to see a new artist's take on an old thing. To me, that's exciting and refreshing. That they want to take this piece of media that I loved so much as a kid, zhuzh it up, if you will, to be more relatable to kids these days so that they get to love it just as much as we did. And I really think what happened, I'm speculating here, but I speculate that Tina Fey, who's heavily involved with the Mean Girls project, obviously, the writer of the original movie, saw TikTok and saw some of the teen girls on TikTok and the way that TikTok has kind of changed the high school experience, and thought that now more than ever, little girls need to hear that message of Mean Girls, that changing yourself to be popular and talking bad about people behind their backs and all of this stuff, it just makes you a mean girl and it doesn't make you happy. That's a really important message. And that's something that I feel like people are kind of trying to help the younger generation understand in a way that maybe we didn't. The whole, "I'm not like other girls, I'm different," like that's not cool anymore. It's cool to be a girl's girl these days. And I love that. Support all women. I say all that to say that to me, this movie was clearly marketed to today's kids and teens. And so that's the angle that I'm coming at it from. From an analysis perspective, I'm looking at it as, was it effective in connecting to kids and teens? Because that's what it wanted to do. And then, of course, I'll give my subjective opinion at the end because I always do. But the other elephant in the room is the Mean Girls Broadway musical. Now, I am a theater kid. It is an embarrassing piece of my past, but one I must embrace. Loved theater my whole life. Thought I was going to pursue musical theater for a while in there. That's actually why I have this mic. But that's neither here nor there. So I pay attention to the new musicals. I pay attention to all of that. When the Mean Girls musical came out, I was really excited for it. A lot of people were. It was backed by a lot of money. It still had Tina Fey involved. And the cast was really, really talented. So it was projected to be very, very good. It wasn't. It was just okay. It's not bad. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's bad, but it was not really good either. It just kind of existed. And I think it left a lot of people feeling like it was more of a cash grab than anything else, which is kind of sad. And to me, and not just me, most people feel like it's the music that was most neglected. Some of the lyric choices are really strange. I can understand the angle they were coming at. I think they tried to incorporate some like slang, teen lingo. I don't know how to explain it, but like the way teenagers talk and phrase sentences, I think they tried to incorporate some of that into the music, and I don't think it delivered as well as they thought it was going to. But specifically the backing music was like the most lazy part of it for me. Most of my complaints about all of the music in the show can actually be summed up by Katie Heron's song. It cuts like so abruptly and it's very strange. And the structure of the song is just like incredibly bizarre. It's like they heard that a big cut in a song, a big like tone shift, could help show that the character had had a bit of like a change of heart or a realization. And then they just scattered that throughout the entire musical, but like with no thought behind it. It's very disjointed. It doesn't really have its own personality. To me, the marker of a really good musical is the fact that you can tell what musical it's from. Even if you were to like replace the main cast so that you couldn't just like recognize the actor, like that the music itself could tell you what show it's from. And I feel like Mean Girls doesn't really have that. Like if you played someone one song from Mean Girls and then you played them a different song from Mean Girls, I don't know that they would know that those two songs were from the same show. The backing music just doesn't really have like a cohesiveness to it. And like I said, it cuts around a bunch and it's really disjointed and confusing. And that's not just on the soundtrack. I've actually watched a bootleg of it and I didn't feel like it was all that much better in the live show. I do feel like the live show is better than listening to the soundtrack strictly because of the jokes jokes and the scenes, I do feel like that does help the songs flow, but the issues are still there. And so you can't write off a lot of the weird cuts as just they cut out a speaking part and didn't put music in between, which is a weird choice all on its own. And they did do that in some songs, World Burn being the best example. The way the song World Burn cuts around on the soundtrack is very strange, and the reason that it's like that is because in the live production there's scenes happening in between. There's these little spoken parts. And I think they either should have left the spoken parts in, or they should have like put a little bit of like transition music in there to just get you from one part to the next. But instead there's just these hard cuts where the Regina character sings a verse and then basically sings the same verse in a different key, and it just like, I don't know, it's strange. It's very strange. A lot of the music, I don't have a better word for it than strange. And so I think that's why a lot of people viewed it as very mid, even though, like I said, the cast is super talented, and I don't at all want this to come across like I'm insulting them. They did the best they could. They were not given very good material. And that's also not to say I don't like some of the songs from it, but I mostly like them because Taylor Lautner is incredible. She's the original Regina George from the Broadway production, and her voice is just, I mean, I've been obsessed with her for a long time. I like a lot of the songs she's in, and I think a lot of people do as well, strictly because she's an incredible performer. But even when you break those songs down, are they really all that good? No, unfortunately, no, they're not. But why does this matter? It's not just me thinking this, right? Mean Girls isn't up on Broadway anymore. You can't see it anymore. It's only been, I guess 6 years since it went up now. Jeez. Time passes, guys. Oh my God. But anyway, it didn't last that long. I don't know when exactly it went down. Oh, jeez. Okay. Wow, that was worse than I thought. I thought it came back a little bit after COVID and then tanked. No, COVID fully killed it, and it never came back after COVID. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of Broadway musicals fail. But like I said, this one was backed by a lot of money, and it had a star-studded cast, and even the people replacing the cast were really, really good. A lot of people think that COVID killed it, but that's not really true. And you can tell that because they brought in Sabrina Carpenter to play Katie right before it went down. It's widely known in the theater circuit that if they start to bring celebrities in to play the main roles, that means that the show itself isn't drawing in enough people, so they need to bring in some kind of big name to get people to come see the show. Most likely, Mean Girls was going to come down within the year, whether or not COVID hit. I think COVID was just the final nail in the coffin. So despite it being based off of one of the most popular and quoted movies of all time, it only lasted 2 years on Broadway. Let me double check that. I think it went up in 2018. I'm just outing myself for having done genuinely zero research before I sat down to film this. This is all ad hoc, by the way. I didn't write a script. Okay. Yep, April 8th, 2018, and it went down in March of 2020, so it lasted almost exactly 2 years. For the amount of backing it had, that is not good. It also tanked at the Tonys, which the Tonys themselves, in my opinion, aren't a good judgment of whether or not a musical is good. R.I.P. Natasha Pierre in The Great Comet of 1812. Lost out a bunch to Dear Evan Hansen, which is the worst musical ever made. It's not here nor there, though. Let's keep talking about Mean Girls. So the musical was mid, right? And basically why it was mid is because the talent was so good. If they had worse talent, it probably would have been considered bad. It went down after 2 years, but they decided to make a movie adaptation of it anyway. And this, I think, ties back around into just getting investment from people. If Tina Fey wanted to make another version of Mean Girls that connected to a younger audience, she probably had to sell it as more than just a remake of the original movie. And so adapting the Broadway musical to the screen was probably an easier sell than just completely remaking the movie. The thing that's especially fascinating to me is that a lot of the criticism that the movie's gotten so far is that the soundtrack is so different from the actual Broadway soundtrack. The especially fascinating part of that is that there's actually one key difference between the Broadway soundtrack and the movie soundtrack, and that difference is the instrumentation. Most of the lyrics are actually the same. There's 1 or 2 different songs. Katie's intro song is different. I think there was another one I noticed while the movie was going, but I'll be honest, I don't remember which one it was. But they did have a few unique songs that weren't in there before. The songs that they had from the Broadway musical, which was most of them, the lyrics of them were almost identical to the Broadway lyrics. It was only the instrumentation that was different. And the lyrics that were changed were mostly lyrics that were kind of in poor taste, in my opinion. The whole story kind of hinges on Regina's weight. And I was curious to see if they were going to keep that, and they did a little bit, but they made it way less emphasis. But in the Broadway production, Regina's weight was a big part of the story as well, and so there were lines in there about her being super skinny at the beginning that they cut out of the movie that I think was probably good. So you're taking a Broadway musical and you're adapting it for a younger audience. And the big criticism of the Broadway musical was the instrumentation. So what do? You change the instrumentation. They made it very rock heavy. There's significantly less instruments. It's not played by a full orchestra by any stretch of the imagination. And there's this incorporation of some more like electronic beats and things like that. But I actually really liked the music from the movie. I was shocked when I saw that so many people were upset that they branched away from the Broadway music. Because like I said, when it was on Broadway, people were like, this music is not very good. The Broadway music was not good, and it was not considered good at the time. People didn't really like it. So they changed it for the movie, and all of a sudden people are pissed off. And to me, I think that is just people having an originalist mindset. When you're used to listening to something a certain way and then you hear something and it's different, it's easy to kind of automatically be like, it's worse. Is it really worse? I think they actually improved it a lot. I think it has a lot more character and it's a lot more cohesive. The songs like relate to each other more and it's a lot easier to hear the similarities, but they still do have a distinct sound. I also think the way the songs were incorporated into the movie was really fun. So again, the criticism of the music just like it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think unfortunately for this movie, it's kind of headed down this train of love to hate. And now people are looking for things to not like about it. And I feel like the soundtrack is part of that. Like, it was already at a disadvantage because people didn't like that they were marketing it as not a musical. And so then the music came out and they were like, and this is worse. And then the movie came out and they were like, and it's stupid and it references TikTok too much. So let's get into the actual movie itself. The plot of it is eerily similar to that of the original movie. They actually didn't really change the plot that much. A lot of the difference, again, is in the incorporation of the music, also in the way that certain things are portrayed. A lot of the jokes are very different, and they reference TikTok a lot. The characters make TikToks in the movie. There's this really cool dance sequence during Sexy, which is Karen's song, where it's a bunch of people getting ready for Halloween, and they're doing, like, transitions to the song that Karen is singing. I'm sorry, but that's genius. If you don't like that, then you don't have to like it, and that's fine. But again, if we're looking at what they were trying to do and whether or not they were successful, they're trying to connect to a younger audience that is growing up on lip syncing videos and dance TikTok videos and things like that. To incorporate something so seamlessly and with such a fun idea of having people do like the get ready with me lip syncing videos for getting ready for Halloween, like over Karen's song, like leading up to the Halloween party, it's objectively smart. It's really good, and I was watching it like very impressed that they thought of that. And Karen does a few TikTok transitions into different costumes. Again, something that the young kids watching this are going to appreciate. They probably liked watching that. They probably thought it was cool. It's adults watching it who are like, this is dumb. Why do they have that? I also thought a lot of the dance numbers and the way they played the music was so fun. I loved the way they did Someone Gets Hurt, where it's like Regina and what's his name, Aaron, and like they're at the party and like all the people in the party are almost like props that Regina's moving around. I like it also because it calls to something they did with Apex Predator, which is something from the original Broadway musical. All of the teens around them are kind of acting like animals as Regina's walking through them. I thought that was really fun that they incorporated that in and they had them all like imitating animals while she was going, because it is a fun reference to the musical. Another criticism I've seen is how many TikTok stars they actually had in the movie. There's a few people who are really famous on TikTok who actually were featured in the movie making TikToks about what was happening at the school. So, you know, video of Regina goes viral and people talking about Regina, talking about Katie, and some of these more famous TikTokers like pitching in their opinions in their own like TikToks that they filmed for the movie. Again, as an adult watching it, you might be like, ugh, they put TikTok stars in this? For kids these days, TikTok stars are celebrities. I think it's interesting because again, our generation for a long time like saw YouTubers as celebrities, but the people older than us were like, YouTubers? That person's a YouTuber? That's so stupid. Why would you have a YouTuber in this movie? I think the same thing's happening now. It's like they had TikTokers in the movie and people our age are being like, that's so dumb. Why would they have TikTokers in the movie? But the kids watching it are probably like, whoa, like this TikToker I really love got to be in the movie. That's so cool. I thought the music was incorporated really well. People have also been talking about how during Stupid with Love, which is one of Katie's songs, they were doing more like TikTok dances. I didn't even notice that, honestly. I don't know if it's because I'm like so out of touch. I did not realize that the dance they were doing were TikTok dances. I thought it was fun. I liked the dancing they were doing. I thought it was just a dance number in the movie. So I can't vouch for whether or not it was TikTok dances they were doing because I don't know. I just saw a few people saying that and they were like, oh, how cringy that they had them doing TikTok dances during one of the dance numbers. I was like, which one? And I had to like look it up. I didn't even catch that. So I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I don't know that I would have if I had noticed that. Like I said, they're trying to relate to a younger audience, so if it's dance moves that like they would know, like that kind of makes sense to me. I don't know. Reneé Rapp is obviously incredible. She gave a really fun performance as Regina, in my opinion, and I think it again just further supports, at least my opinion, on adaptations. If you want to watch a version of Mean Girls that features Rachel McAdams' Regina, then just watch the original Mean Girls. I liked that we kind of got a different take on Regina. Somebody else read the script and tried it a little bit different. So she does feel very different from the original Regina, but she feels very real. Reneé Rapp is a gorgeous singer, gorgeous human, and a really good actress, and I thought she gave a great performance. I also liked both of the other plastics. I thought Karen was super funny, and Gretchen felt very real, probably the most similar to the original characters. Of those three, I feel like the girl who played Gretchen did the best almost imitation of the original Gretchen, but it still all felt very cohesive. They also did reference the original movie a lot in a way that made it still good nostalgia bait. I do think if you like the original movie, you'll still get a lot out of this, even if you're not like the intended audience. There were a few things I didn't like though, I'll be honest. It wasn't all sunshine and daisies. I thought it was really strange that they casted incredible singers for so many of the roles, but then Katie's voice wasn't that strong. It's just very strange to me that it's like you have Reneé Rapp, who like is such a good singer that she sings circles around like other Broadway stars. And then you have her playing across from a girl who they had to change a lot of the music for so that she was singing it lower. And to me, that's just bad casting. Like, I don't fault the actress for that. It's not her fault that they put her in a role that she wasn't going to be successful in. I just thought it was strange. And she did a really good job acting. Like, her acting was phenomenal and she was very, like, believable as Katie, but I just kind of felt bad for her when the songs came on. Fighting for her life a little bit in there, competing with Reneé. I thought it was really strange that Aaron didn't sing once. I don't know why. In the musical, he sings a lot, obviously. He's not one of the main characters. He's kind of a side character in this. He sings still, and he has like duets with Katie and stuff. And I just thought it was really strange that they just decided he wasn't going to sing anything. I don't know if it's just because they like really wanted to cast him. There is a really funny clip of Tina Fey where she says that like when he was in his final read for the role, that she had like her 12-year-old daughter and all of her friends sitting there. She like turned her laptop around or whatever and showed him to them, and they were like, yes, he's hot. And she was like, okay, he's the one. So she made sure that he like appealed to 12-year-olds, which I thought was really funny. But that's what I'm saying. I think Tina Fey took a lot of the care that she needed to make sure that this was relatable to teens. And especially hearing that she has such a young daughter now, it makes sense that this is what she wanted to do, that she wanted to remake it for more her daughter's generation. I think that's really sweet. And honestly, I don't get it. I don't get a lot of the criticism it's been getting. I think if you go into it with an open mind and you go into it not expecting it to be a carbon copy of the original movie, then it's super fun. You're allowed to not like it. You're allowed to not like it. I just don't agree with you. I also have a complaint that is honestly like permeates all three of these stories. I don't like the way that Janice is portrayed as a hero at the end. Katie had a point when she said, you turned me into this. Janice was also a mean girl throughout this. And I feel like in the original movie that was a little bit more obvious. But in this one, like Janice is portrayed as completely in the right. I mean, Katie is like more in the wrong and she's ultimately the most in the wrong, as well as Regina. But I just don't really like the way that Janice herself never really apologizes. Because it's like, what message are you sending? Again, if you're trying to like send a message to the little girls of the world that being a mean girl isn't the way to be, Janice was a mean girl in the beginning as well. Janice wanted Katie in there in order to like gossip about the plastics, and then it was Janice's idea to sabotage Regina. So I just think it's really strange that she herself never says that she's sorry or that she feels like she did anything wrong. It's just an odd message to send to the kids of today, in my opinion. I thought it was really fun, and I certainly thought they were successful in doing what they were trying to do. And I have a friend whose mom is a middle school teacher, and her kids really, really liked it. At least among 7th and 8th graders, it is really popular, which again is the demographic. And I guess that's just the last thing I want to say is that a lot of the criticism has been very disappointing to me, because I feel like when we were young, there were a lot of people pointing at our generation and saying that the things we liked were stupid and that we were all messed up and we were going to grow up to be horrible adults who couldn't function. And that we said that we were going to be like better than that. And that when we got to be adults, we were going to understand that we had just outgrown youth culture and that we weren't going to fall into this vicious cycle of turning on the generation behind us and saying, you guys are terrible. And that's exactly what people are doing. So they're looking at media made for kids and saying it's dumb because you're judging it as though it was made for adults, but it's not. You're not the demographic for it. Especially with the Sephora Kids stuff and stuff like that now, I just feel like there's so much hate piling on this generation that's growing up right now. That's, again, it's a tale as old as time. It's the oldest cliche in the book. It happened to my generation. I'm sure it happened to the generation before. Where people just look at you and they say, like, you're never going to amount to anything. Your generation's all screwed up. Like, it was so much better when I was a kid, blah, 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 blah. It's happened since the dawn of time and it will continue to happen. And it's just really sad to me because I held a genuine hope when I was seeing people post about this on Tumblr when I was like 12, that we all would grow up to be able to recognize that something just wasn't made for us and that we just don't understand youth culture. And that doesn't mean that kids these days are awful. It just means we don't understand them and that we're older now and we're a part of the adult culture now. And I just think there's a lot of people who A, don't want to accept that, and B, maybe don't understand how that relates back into their opinion about media that's being made now. But it's okay for something to be made and intended to be for middle schoolers and early high schoolers. That's an okay demographic to target, and it doesn't make it inherently bad if that was the demographic you were targeting. And the original Mean Girls was targeted to that demographic, like middle and high schoolers, and it was successful in that demographic. And this one's targeted to the same demographic, and it's being successful in that demographic. Just food for thought. Just stuff to think about in your life and the way you treat kids and things like that. Just understand that just because you don't maybe understand everything to do with them doesn't mean that they're horrible, doesn't mean that they're going to grow up to be awful. And even if they do, I mean, there were plenty of awful kids when we were kids. Think about all the awful adults you know. They were once awful children. If you were on the fence about going to see it, I think you should. I thought it was a lot of fun. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I cannot even begin to express in words how cool it is to see the reaction to my last video. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it so much. I'm gonna keep making them. I really enjoy it. And I'm gonna go back. I am doing Twilight next. Twilight is going to be my next, revisit of books from my youth. But I just wanted to make this in the meantime. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, stick around and subscribe. All right, have a good day. Bye.